George Francis Wilson was born on November 18, 1892, on the outskirts of the ranching community known as Glendive, Dawson County, Montana. His father, Louis George Wilson, was a former XIT cattleman from Oregon, and his mother, Fanny Alice Luttrell, came from a fairly well-off family in Ohio. George came from a family of 7 and grew up in a sod house. When his father died in January of 1902, George was left to take care of his family. As a young man, he worked for multiple well-known ranches, such as the XIT and CK. When working at these ranches, he became extremely good with horses and became a prominent bronc rider in the Shields Valley area. George was a strong and well-built man when he registered to serve in the military on May 3, 1918, standing 5'5" and weighing about 130 pounds. He was inducted into service on June 24, 1918, in Dawson County, Montana. After being inducted, he was sent to Fort Lewis near Tacoma, Washington. Here he retrieved basic training and was assigned to the 166th Depot Brigade until August 14, 1918. Sometime in September, George was assigned to Company F, 8th Infantry Regiment, and was moved to Camp Fremont, California. In early October, he and Company F, 8th Infantry Regiment were moved to Hoboken, New Jersey. On October 23, 1918, he and his infantry regiment were sent to France on the Princess Matoaka. He arrived in Brest, France on October 28, 1918. At this time, the war was just about ending, and according to George, he never had to fire his rifle. While in France, the company was marching at dusk, and the Germans had the regiment in their sights. Supposedly, the Kaiser ordered them to begin shelling. As the bombardment began, all the men scrambled for cover, every man for himself. George and 2 other fellows jumped into a shell hole, hoping not to be blown to pieces by another one. As this was going on, the teamsters were unhooking the horses and mules to let them roam free. George and the 2 other men stayed in that shell hole all night, and at some point it began to rain. In the early morning, George Wilson looked outside of the hole and saw multiple dead soldiers and multiple dead or wounded horses. Through the fog, he was able to see an unhooked horse that was grazing on the battlefield. George thought to himself, well, I might as well make myself useful, and he jumped out of that hole and went over to the horse. He discovered that it was a broodmare, and when he unhooked it, he rode it into the battlefield and collected all the horses and mules that were grazing about. When he was close to being done, the brigadier general of his regiment asked either a captain or a lieutenant who that young man was. The higher-ranking soldier informed George that the brigadier general wanted to talk to him, and he thought that he was in trouble, that he had done something wrong. When he talked to this brigadier general, the general asked what was his name, rank, and unit. George responded, Private First Class George F. Wilson, Company F, 8th Infantry Regiment. The brigadier general then told George that he was now his head teamster. What battle this was is unknown, since all sources list the 8th Infantry Regiment as not seeing any action. This is incorrect, since a few sources list the regiment as making it to France before armistice on November 11, 1918. And of course, the story clearly goes against this. After the armistice was signed, the 8th Infantry Regiment was stationed as garrison of Brest, and they helped build camps for troops about to return to the United States. George and his regiment were stationed at Camp Pontoise, Brest, France, for over a year. In mid-July, the regiment was moved to Germany and the Army of Occupation, but not before he was promoted. George F. Wilson was promoted to corporal on July 7, 1919, at Camp Pontoise, Brest, France. When the regiment made it to Germany, they arrived in the town of Remagen. On July 23, 1919, George wrote a letter to his sister, Hattie, saying, Dear sister, your dear sweet letter at hand, and I will answer it. Well, sis, I am well and feeling fine, only I get lonesome for old Montana pretty often. But I guess I won't have to wait much longer now. I think we'll leave here sometime before the 15th of next month. Cliff is on his way home. I think he will be home before you get this letter. I hope so, anyway. I have moved since you wrote to me. I am still further away from home. I am in Germany now. We are doing guard on the Rhine River. I have also changed my rank. I am a corporal now instead of a private. Well, sis, I am corporal of the guard today, so I'm not going to write much. But I will have a fine story to tell you when I see you, and I hope that will be soon. I will close with love and kisses to you. I'm as ever your loving brother. On August 10, 1919, George F. Wilson was transferred to Company G, 26th Infantry Regiment. For what reason is unknown. It's likely that the 8th Infantry Regiment was sent back to the United States and the higher-ranking officers decided to keep George, maybe because of his expertise with horses. Around this time, the regiment was moved back to Brest, France to be sent back to the United States. Company G, 26th Infantry Regiment departed from France on August 23, 1919, on the Callow. They arrived in Hoboken, New Jersey on September 4th, 1919. Once George arrived, he was taken to Fort D.A. Russell, Wyoming. George Francis Wilson was honorably discharged on September 26, 1919 at Fort D.A. Russell. George Francis Wilson would return home and work for various ranches and would eventually marry Hetty Margaret Stevenson in 1923. George was an extremely patriotic man and was very proud of his service. He loved his country and the people in it so much that he cried when he heard the news of the U.S. entering World War II. George Francis Wilson died on January 11, 1979 in Wilsaw, Park County, Montana.